Welcome, everybody. We're here to talk about a new chip from Tim Lucky 8. And this one's going to be about detecting offers that are dishonest. And I'm going to share my screen here. We can actually look at the chip. Oh, yeah, you've renamed it to Handling Dishonest NFT Offers. So, Tim, why don't you describe what this chip is and what your motivation for creating it was?
Sure. So as most of you know, I've done a little bit of consulting for Sol's Lot. Uh, That was what I was actively working on when we stumbled into this. In their model, they basically their business model is based on an initial fee from the person selling the property, and then kind of survive on royalties as properties trade over time. Um, so in in essence, it was a big part of the business model, and um, looking at the size of the value of those NFTs compared to a lot of the ones that were on Chia, they were um, pretty getting pretty expensive. And, you, every time they did a sale, they would hit the top of the XCH charts on Mint Garden and Dexy. Um, so the motivation here is basically uh, a bypass was discovered, um, where in the case of having two parties who are willing to collude, and this is specifically limited to collusion. I want to be clear on that so people aren't too alarmed. But by agreeing to collude, the maker of the offer can underdeclare in the trade prices list of the NFT how much value is being exchanged. And what will happen is an honest taker, uh, by that I mean uh, the Chia reference wallet or other ones that follow this scheme, will go ahead and recalculate the royalties themselves and just pin them on. Um, so they happen as long as at least one of the parties is being honest. So the two things I'm worried about in bringing up this issue are wash trading meant to drive up fake prices and fake volume on collections, and NFT flippers. We've seen this a lot on Ethereum and other chains. Um, they're making so little on every time they sell the NFT that they're getting a unique competitive advantage against the other parties by not paying royalty to the creator. Um, so the spirit of this is just to increase trader confidence and provide some recommendations for handling uh, any of these types of offers in wallets, offer display services, and when we go to calculate trading volume. And I'll explore some of the kind of further mitigation that I looked at, but I think the costs are probably greater than the benefits for those. So basically, just what I'm looking at proposing here is detecting two classes of offers, and helping ecosystem builders and users know that those are happening. And the two classes of offers that I've broken down here are dishonest offers and suspicious offers. There's probably still some wordsmithing that can happen here around the definitions, but I'll explain what I mean by them. So, um, if one or more NFTs is being traded for one or more coins right now, my thought is that the sum of all the trade prices list payments should be equal to the sum of the value being requested in the offer. Um, my hypothesis is if it is not, the offer maker is explicitly under declaring the pricing that will then drive royalty calculation. Um, so what we do with that information might be um, suppress those offers. We might have like a splash that says, "Hey, we don't participate in propagating offers that have these weird characteristics," or we don't display them on our offer display service. Or it could be a matter of providing visual cues that tell the user to look a little deeper and make sure this is something you want to take. We're not trying to control people's behaviors. We're just trying to make sure they're fully participating with knowledge, and if they're being tricked in some way, that they are notified about that. Um, uh, so let's see. So another thing I'd like to hit on the dishonest offers that I don't think has been formalized, but I would like to bring up for discussion is a thought that if you aggregate offers of multiple NFTs for multiple coins, and you combine them, and there's some process, which is an operation you can do inside of um, the Chia blockchain code and other implementations of wallets. Um, because those trade prices inside of each uh, NFT offer would be immutable. My hypothesis here that I'm kind of putting forward for discussion is that the NFT trade prices list must be in the context of each NFT on its own. When you start out with a one NFT for one set of coins, you aggregate them, they should still mean the same thing. I don't think that we've seen any. I haven't seen a spec anywhere of what trade prices list is supposed to mean. I've seen what the behavior is in the code, but I don't know if I've seen someone's exploration of what it should actually mean. Um, and what I think is happening in the UIs of wallets is you go to create an offer, there's a multi-select for all the things you want to request, and there's selections for all you want to offer, and they're in no ways bound to each other. So their end result is not. Brayden, do you have a question?
I just wanted to mention the trade price isn't like something that the user currently gets to decide. It's just a division of the actual price divided by the number of royalty enabled NFTs that you are trading. So if you're trading three NFTs for 1,000 mojos, they're each going to get roughly 333 mojos as the trade price.
Yeah, and I'll hit on the ramifications of that and suspicious offers as well. Um, I I agree that that's what's happening now. I don't know if that's what a so in the case where a user does a one offer and offers one NFT for a set of one or more coins, the trade prices list is going to be directly tied to the total offer amount. Is that correct? It's going to be in an honest wallet.
Or what was it?
In the case where you're offering one NFT for a set of coins, the trade prices list is going to be directly tied to that NFT.
Yeah, it
Uh,
should be the full amount that you're requesting.
so I guess what I'm proposing in there is we should probably um, like talk a little bit about what the expectation is for trade prices list in any multi offer, whether it's an aggregation of single offers or whether it starts out as a multi offer. Um, because like you said, there's the behavior now, but I don't know if it was specifically thought through all these ramifications in this case. And I'll hit this up a little bit on the suspicious offer as well. So uh, I brought in this kind of IRL scam that I've seen happen to ticket scalping. Um, in some places, there's quite a bit of um, controls around how you can price tickets. It's meant to protect um, people who want to go to an event and don't want to pay marked up prices. So some places are really strict about the price of this is it cannot ever be more than the price it was originally created for. Well, what they'll do is they will say, okay, here's an event ticket plus some sort of collectible, and the total price is well greater than the allowed sellable price of that ticket alone. And so there's some wishy-washy argument around the value of that collectible. So they use that as a defense that they're not breaking any laws. They're just selling a collectible bundled with a ticket. Um, so the equivalent in this in NFT trading, as we talked about with trade prices list, you could throw um, like a blue chip NFT in 20 considered junk NFTs, throw NFTs people got for free or never were perceived by the market to have any value, and um, list them for about the real price of the blue chip, and people are like, oh, I can just burn all these other dumb ones I don't want. And sure, that's a great deal. The downside is that, as we talked about with the trade prices list, it arbitrarily splits up the prices list among all of those. So the person who perhaps created those junk NFTs is actually incentivized to get a chunk of royalties out of a big blue chip NFT sale. So um, that's what I'm classifying as suspicious offers. So um,
So are you saying that you can make an offer that sells an NFT that's supposed to be worth a lot for less and then aggregate it with another offer for something that should be worth less and is actually being priced at more?
I'm saying the royalty prices for all those blue chips uh, gets distributed to all the junk that happens to be in the offer.
Yeah, yeah.
That's that's
So,
that's what I'm getting at. And I've seen examples of this. I saw it before I realized what people were doing, and I've actually heard people tell me that they didn't intend to do anything. They were just trying to get rid of stuff. I don't know if I believe that or if they actually figured this out quite a while ago, but I've seen these kind of batch offers on Dexy and wondered what the heck people were doing. Um, but it does definitely have that impact in the wild of um, the all the NFTs that nobody could ever sell, probably maybe couldn't even give away in some cases. Um, they get the equal share of the royalty price um, of the blue chip. So
Yeah.
it's a
I
it's
would,
a go ahead.
sorry.
go
I
ahead,
would
Brandon.
argue that's a valid use case is wanting to sell a bunch of NFTs at once, but I do see how equally splitting the royalties amongst them could be problematic. Like I have seen like an offer of the number one NFT of like 10 different collections all in one offer, for example.
Yeah, I think there is an argument um, having that capability. Um, I think if we talked about how trade prices lists should be aggregated, I think maybe we could make that better. It would potentially change the user experience for a lot of tools though. So I'm sensitive to the underlying concern that's creating a lot of work for people. Um,
Yeah, I saw one of the recommendations in the chip is to allow the user to specify the trade price for each NFT, right?
I think if they could allocate the parts of the whole, um, it would better emulate what would happen if you had offer for coin, offer for coin that you then aggregated.
Yeah.
It seems like symmetrical, and I can draw into that symmetry, I guess. Um, it is one aspect where it would make the user interface more tedious, both for the people building it and for the people using it. Um, but it is one aspect that I did suggest.
Yeah, I think it's possible to do that. like you said, they're making multiple offers and aggregating them, and I kind of think that's a an even riskier thing though, because you could say that the like you have a tree of friends and you're setting the trade price to zero, and then you set the trade price of something with 0.1% royalties to the full amount, for example. So I think that would actually make it easier to evade royalties, but you can do it already. So
Would make it actually really obvious that that's exactly what you're doing. Whereas you kind of have the plausible deniability if you offer like 20 junk NFTs plus a Chia friend for 100 XCH, you can plausibly deny that you're trying to avoid the royalty or greatly reduce it.
sure.
And I think if I remember right, the maximum royalty you can set is 655%.
Mhm.
Um, so in this case of those junk NFTs, you could make the junk NFTs just for the scam, and you could really take off. I had to look through the math on that. I think that weights it even heavier in favor of the junk NFT. But
Well, I think it'd be cheaper to set the or the royalty percentage to something as close to zero as possible because the trade price gets distributed basically before the royalty percentage is applied. So you could assign the full trade price to an NFT that has almost no royalties, and you just pay less that way.
if you distribute it all to the one that had 655% royalties, um,
Well, the taker would have to pay more in that case.
okay. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on the math. I haven't gone through the consequences of that, but I did want to bring it up for discussion.
And I think that the risk would be you have an open market and a bunch of people are selling similar NFTs, and someone finds out that they can make it more appealing to the buyers if they somehow remove part of the royalty, and then it's just cheaper to buy their dishonest NFT instead.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening if we have uh I'll call it a fungible NFT where um maybe it's not the right word, but some of the like I think about how we got with Bored Apes on Ethereum where people are buying things as a status symbol and yeah, they would rather have a better one, but they'll take anyone just to be a part of the club and get the benefits that are associated with it. Um, when it gets to the point where if we have any of those types of collections on Chia, um, if there's an entry point into an ecosystem you want to be a part of, um, you might, if there's no consequences, you might just try to get the best deal you can, no matter who gets who gets hurt, which is kind of why some of that extended discussion on the chip came about around things like whether in those cases revocation might need to happen or something. I don't want to open that discussion up too much just because I think it's kind of a different beast, but um, it is an interesting thing in terms of the talking about what the consequences are if you do these things. Like what consequences do we have as a community that we can actually offer up realistically to people to counter antisocial behavior, really.
Okay,
Yeah,
so on
especially
that, oh,
various forms of.
sorry. Okay, I'll just throw this out there. So on that note, I wanted to just clarify. It sounds like what you'd like to do here is more of a short-term thing to layer on top of NFT one as some recommendations for marketplaces and wallets to deal with dishonest offers, and then possibly down the road, make a more of a long-term solution, such as an NFT two or something that's not necessarily backwards compatible, but would be more robust against this kind of dishonesty. Is that does that pretty much describe your goal here?
Yeah, I'm continuing to think about a longer term solution. I don't know that um, I don't know what that would look like, but yeah, I am trying to carve up this one in terms of um, the social ramifications, I guess, and kind of disincentivizing rather than like absolutely blocking certain behaviors. So that's one of the things I explored a little bit in this, and I skipped over it when we were going through it just because it's kind of tedious. But I can step back to it. Other things that we had looked at. Um, let's see. Yeah, and the rationale. So some other things I looked at were modifications to the default NFT transfer program and or the settlement layer. But if we were to do something like that, the migration process from NFT one to NFT two would probably be fairly painful for everybody involved in the ecosystem because of the tooling and reissuance and impacts on how we interpret provenance and things like that. So since my thought was the NFT one OG projects like Chia Friends and other ones that have been here for a long time are probably most likely to be the target for these kind of attacks, because they have more perceived value and deepest provenance. It doesn't make sense to necessarily go about a route that involves a change like that. I think in a grander scheme, if we do find a true flaw or exploit in NFT one at some point, we'll have to decide as a community how we interpret things like provenance in that case, how we encode it into the follow up reissue assets and things like that. But I think it's a big can of worms. Another thing I looked at in kind of the rationale, looking at doing mempool validation where a node could just choose not to ever include these in its gossip or in its own farm blocks if it didn't like the structure of it. Um, there's a couple things I don't like about it. One is that you could probably overwhelm some nodes with uh, creating obnoxious offers and just creating them in high enough volume that you just knew they're going to spend all the time validating them and dropping them, which is kind of it's be super annoying. Um, um, and then there's other ways potentially that they could create cyclic announcement dependencies with other spins in the mempool that can maybe still do atomic side value transfer. So I don't think that it's a, a reasonable thing to do at scale in real time. Um, Thinking about things as like a entry point into like a splash or an offer display service, they need to process the offer one time and then can display it for all of the participants in that ecosystem, kind of at the in a lighter way, I think, um, than if every single node participating has to independently do all this validation. Um, so that was the point I wanted to hit back at. Like, if we do an NFT two, it might be something that we don't necessarily love how it manifests itself in the day-to-day usage of the ecosystem. So
Okay. One thing that comes to mind here is you have a couple different types of offers that you've talked about here, and you've had some things that Walt should do, and I guess there's a couple of must do's. And you talked about actually, I like this as a test case. That what would be really great is if we had a list of here's what a dishonest offer looks like, here's what a suspicious offer looks like, and maybe some examples. And then we can have some kind of filter or test that if a wallet is going to be compliant or a marketplace is going to be compliant, it should be able to pass at least some sort of reference code that it detects all of these dishonest offers, and it doesn't get too strong that it detects honest offers as being dishonest. And I know it's hard to create this because it's so subjective as to is this just this guy wants to offload a bunch of NFTs or is he actually being dishonest? So um it'd be great though if we could draw the line somewhere and just have some kind of standardized way for everyone who's building something to do this. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, that's why I broke it down this way into dishonest versus suspicious. I think the suspicious analysis is more qualitative and probabilistic. Um, I think if we can all agree on how trade prices list should work, I think that the dishonest offers could be more of a definitive Boolean dishonest, true, false kind of thing. Um, so I would be open to kind of formalizing a tool around that. Suspicious, I think, is more. It's less a decision made based on the offer itself and more about how the offer behaves more broadly in the ecosystem. Data like sales and volume and floor price of the collections, things like that are really hard to make a tool unless you're already in the business of holding that type of data. Um,
Yeah, it
So
makes sense. Go ahead, Brandon.
yeah, one question I have is, let's say we have three offers. One of them is like perfectly fine, one of them is suspicious, and one is dishonest. What would you say the correct way to show them in a wallet or display surface would be in your mind?
well, I would think the normal offer would be unlabeled. I would think of the dishonest offer as kind of a big red flag, warrant like a warning icon, and maybe a kind of a caution light approach for the suspicious offers. Like read, or maybe a pair of eyeballs. Like read deeper, make sure you agree to doing this. I mean, I just think a tagging mechanism where people are like um, called to look deeper. Hey, we saw something strange here. Kind of like the suspicious trading that's been labeled and used for wash trading before in Dexy.
So that makes
Like,
sense for the suspicious offer, but for the dishonest ones, especially since it's more objective, would it make more sense to, like, if you want to follow this chip, to just block that offer entirely versus just red flagging it?
I think if we have consensus on what trade prices list means, then I think yes, I think that would be ideal.
Okay.
Um,
I guess the detection mechanism would have to take into account any changes that we make in the future to how that's calculated. Um, I guess the objective way would be, does the total trade prices match up with the value on the other end rather than one of them individually?
Hey,
and uh,
Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
nice. She excited? No.
Oh, all right.
you might be on another call.
It might, maybe, yeah.
um, what I was just gonna say, you lost my train of thought a little bit on that.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just
So in,
deciding what to do about
Yeah,
um dishonest offers.
I remember what I was gonna say. So I one of the counter examples that I think Andreas brought up is the way that Pocket supports um, creating these. Um, it's basically just always using empty trade prices list, but if you accept an offer in Pocket, it still adds the royalties in. So I reached out to uh, one of the Pocket developers. I don't know exactly what their organization is, but I asked if they would be open to a community paid bounty to change that behavior. He said he would think about it. I haven't heard anything further um, since then, but that's one of the challenges with immediately labeling things flat out as dishonest or banning them from propagation is that we do have kind of weak assurances that the existing data is going to be appropriately formed.
yeah. I guess in a wallet, if you are viewing an offer that's dishonest, um, because the wallet's going to add the royalty anyways, I don't know. Maybe in that case, it doesn't make sense to show it in wallets that it's dishonest. Whereas if it's a suspicious offer, you'd actually give it more scrutiny because you want the taker to make sure that they agree with the distribution of that royalty payment. So maybe just showing a breakdown in the wallet when you're taking an offer would make sense. Like this is where your royalties are going and why.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Right. I think the main thing for the chip is just to make sure there's actually something people can use that is clearly written down in the chip is here's how it works. So that would be one suggestion. Not that you have to use it, but one possibility. Another thing I was thinking about is the provenance of NFTs. What about flagging that somehow if it's been traded dishonestly in the past?
I'm torn on it just from my own personal experience. Um, I had an NFT that I had paid fairly decent amount, at least for my collecting, on Ethereum that I got fished on that wallet because I was doing something too fast and didn't read all the what I was signing. Um, and I filed a police report on it, which is OpenSea's requirement to get things labeled as blocked for display or ineligible to trade on their platform. But it had already sold before I could get the police report over to the over fax over to OpenSea. So basically, the person who had paid maybe a little bit of a discount, but not significantly, now had this NFT that was being labeled as stolen. Um, I ended up making a deal to pay them to buy it from them because I wanted it back. Um, it just seems weird if if we can make it instantaneous. I guess it would be a little bit different than my scenario. But I was just sensitive to people who were tricked, um, suddenly having a deflated value thing that they had overpaid for.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think if you have an instant way to automatically mark it as such, we probably shouldn't apply that retroactively. So it'd be only for future trades. That way, someone who currently owns the NFT doesn't all of a sudden like wake up one day and it's been blocked or marked as suspicious or something.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that
yeah, that all makes sense. So I would just suggest that if you do go with something like that, just put it in the chip and uh, try to make sure that it's got to be instantaneous or write the exact terms of how this can be marked stolen and make sure it's instantaneous to avoid what you just described. That that's one way to go about doing it.
yeah,
Uh,
I like
yeah, I want to open the floor though to anybody else. If anybody else has questions or comments on this chip, just jump in.
Well, I did want to mention one thing, which I think it's partially um, a problem of people not really fully understanding that this is a problem. I think that uh, in the past, I'm not going to name names, but someone just casually suggested that they send me the NFTs and I send them payment instead of going through an offer to make it cheaper. I don't even like, did they realize that they were literally evading a royalty payment to the creators, or were they just not even thinking about that? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I've I've run into those where people were using wallets. This was quite a while ago, but using wallets with limited feature sets, and they like literally couldn't take some types of offers and stuff like that, or they could take offers, but they couldn't make them in their wallet. Um, And there were a couple times where people offered me side deals, and I even like looked up the NFT metadata and made the payment independently to the royalty address.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think it's a very real thing for a variety of reasons.
I had a question. I do apologize. I guess I had my mic on when I got another call. Um, about suspicious offers and like what other categorically suspicious offers there may be in the future. For example, like modifying the receiving address or modifying the pay address. Are there certain things that can be modified in an offer file that um, at first glance uh, can confuse or deceive the taker?
The royalty address and payment addresses are all static and can't be changed by either party. It's just the
It's
amount.
possible to make a three-legged offer, um, because the wallet doesn't know what the request address is. Or, you know, you, it can't be changed, but you could put into the wallet a request for payment to an address that's not in your control. I don't know of any benefit to doing that, but um, or any real way to detect it. But it's basically how the Inferno technique worked that I created to be able to request a burn of something in exchange for value.
So,
Uh,
so my only concern about that is if I make an offer for your Chia friends, but in the offer that I made, it says to pay the money to not the Chia friends owner's address, but a third party wallet.
Yeah, no,
But
the
it,
royalty
it
address is encoded into the NFT itself.
okay.
yeah,
And then can I make an offer or allow someone to generate an offer for their Chia friends that um, sends the Chia friends right back to them in exchange for amount of money, or sends the Chia friends to a third party wallet in exchange for an amount of money. So while a user thinks they're buying a Chia friends, it's really duping them into sending money and then just sending the NFT to a third party wallet.
The the way offers work is that the maker sends the NFT to an intermediate coin, which can be spent however the taker decides to. So the taker always gets to decide where the NFT goes to.
In the case that the taker is taking an offer that essentially appears like a 10xch4 Chia friends, but it functions differently because are they going to detect that the Chia friends is not actually being paid out to them? Is that something in the UI that's easy to understand?
If it
there's
goes,
no way to do that.
if it doesn't go to the settlement puzzle, it's not a valid offer. So there's no way to trick someone like that.
Okay.
And then what the taker does is asserts the transfer of the desired assets from the settlement layer to their own wallet when they sign their side of the offer. So yeah, there's no risk there that I've seen after digging through it quite a bit.
Cool. Good.
Yeah, offers
Thanks.
themselves seem to be really solid. And they've that code has gone through multiple audits. And these are very expensive and time consuming, and they uh, nothing, no major issues have been found there.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions or comments on this chip? Stuff you might want to add? Uh, okay, so as the editor of this chip, I mean, I have my own opinions, but just to keep it just even keeled here, the what we need to have, in my opinion, here is that we should have a good way for detecting at least some of these dishonest offers, or um, if not the suspicious ones. we should have a system for flagging them somehow or whatever it's going to be. I'm not telling you how to write it, but just some kind of objective way of analyzing offers that if anyone wants to follow this chip, then they can just implement the strategy, and then they should know if they're compliant or not with this chip somehow. So we'll need a bit more information in here. And then obviously on this call, we have a bunch of developers that are either making wallets or marketplaces or whatever. And so once you, I mean, I feel free to continue the discussion in the chip itself. And once you have something that you think is pretty good that people seem to agree on, then I'll put it into review and then make sure everybody gets a good chance to look at it and see if they're okay with it. And then we can push it forward from there.
Sounds good.
I can look it over again and add some thoughts as to what I might want to do in Sage the trip.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Thanks. It's totally fine if there's more types of offers. We have the two types right now, and if there's more details in the chip, it can be as long or short as you need it to be, just so that we cover as many of the edge cases as we can. And then going forward, longer term, if you wanted to think about some of these more, I don't know, invasive things or bigger upgrades to NFTs themselves, that's great too. That can come from the community. So that's just got to be a different chip. And it's another discussion, but something we could start thinking about at least even today.
Yeah, I don't know how relevant it is, but I have put some thought into potentially an offer v3 standard. So if there are ideas on how to improve this aspect, then maybe that could fit in.
One thing I thought as I was looking through this in detail was if it made sense for there to be like a fee or royalty layer on top of the offer layer for things like this, or things like people who are rebroadcasting or providing a service, whether there's some sort of optional layers that the offer mod could be more aware of. But I'm not married to the idea. It's just something that's come to mind while thinking about this.
Okay. Well, as you add more stuff to the chip, just make a little comment in the PR and then people will see it. And then they
Will do.
can keep checking it over.
Sounds good. And I'm available through all the channels if anybody wants to ask a question that they don't feel comfortable putting on directly on the GitHub, and I'll try to be the best advocate I can for this. And one thing I had said in one channel of discussing this is that I think it will be important someday, but I don't think it's necessarily urgent. So I'm not trying to create a fire under anybody, just so much as we get the trillions of dollars of liquidity. I do think we'll have our bad actors just like everybody else did.
Oh yeah, we realize we're not immune to that. But okay, thanks, Tim. Thanks for your time and everybody
Thanks,
else for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the trip.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day all.
Take care.
See you later.